The city was alive with the sounds of traffic, footsteps, and chatter as people hurried about their business. Among the crowd, a young homeless girl sat near a public piano tucked into a quiet corner of the park. She wore worn-out clothes and her hair was tangled, but there was a quiet determination in her eyes that made her seem different from everyone else around her. People walked past without noticing her, treating her as if she were invisible. She held a small, tattered notebook in her lap, filled with sketches of musical notes and melodies she had imagined in her mind. A sleek black car pulled up near the park. The door opened, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. He was the CEO of a well-known company, a man used to people listening when he spoke. He walked through the park on his lunch break, enjoying a rare moment away from the office. As he passed by, he noticed the girl sitting alone by the piano. She looked fragile and small, yet there was something about her that caught his attention. Curious, he stopped and watched her for a moment. She picked at the edge of her notebook, seemingly lost in thought. Her fingers brushed over the piano keys lightly, almost absent-mindedly, as if she were testing the instrument. The CEO smiled to himself. He could see the way people ignored her, and for some reason it amused him. Leaning slightly forward, he said aloud, "If you can play the piano, I will feed you." His voice carried a teasing tone, a challenge he didn't expect her to take seriously. The girl looked up, startled by the sudden voice. Her eyes met his, wide and cautious. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if he was mocking her. But something inside her stirred. She had learned to trust her music more than anyone's words. Slowly, she nodded and whispered, "I can try." Her voice was soft, almost fragile, but it carried a quiet confidence that surprised the CEO. He chuckled, expecting a clumsy attempt, and waited. People around them had started to notice the scene. Some stopped to see what was happening, curious about the interaction between the well-dressed man and the homeless girl. The CEO's assistant, standing a few steps behind him, watched silently, unsure why his boss was suddenly so interested in a stranger. The CEO, still smiling, waved him over and said, "Bring her something to eat if she even touches the keys properly." He didn't think she could play well, and in his mind, this was more of a game than a serious offer. The girl moved closer to the piano, her movements careful and deliberate. She set her notebook aside and took a deep breath, placing her hands on the keys. The first note she played was soft, almost hesitant, but it was perfectly in tune. The CEO raised his eyebrows, not expecting even that much. She played another note, then a short sequence, each sound more confident than the last. The music was gentle, yet it had a purity that drew the attention of everyone nearby. Passers-by began to gather, forming a small circle around the piano. Some whispered to each other, astonished at the skill they were witnessing. The girl closed her eyes, letting her fingers move freely, guided by something deep inside her. She had spent countless hours alone, practicing on whatever she could find, and now it was showing. Each note was clear, each movement deliberate. The music had a way of telling her story without words. The struggles, the hope, the dreams she carried within her. The CEO, who had been smiling and chuckling, now looked on with a mix of surprise and admiration. He had seen many talented musicians in his life, but there was something raw and genuine about this girl. She played not for recognition or reward, but because it was part of who she was. Her hands danced across the keys, creating melodies that seemed too complex for someone with so little formal training. The air around them changed. The usual noise of the park faded, replaced by the sound of the piano and the quiet hum of awe from the crowd. The girl's music grew more confident as she continued. She played with emotion, sometimes soft and tender, other times strong and powerful. Her small frame seemed to disappear into the music, and for a few moments, everyone watching forgot the world outside the piano's reach. The CEO, who had initially come to the park for a brief escape, found himself completely absorbed. His laughter was gone, replaced by a profound respect for the talent before him. After a few minutes, the girl finished her piece. She opened her eyes and looked at the CEO, unsure of his reaction. For a moment there was silence. The crowd held its breath, waiting. Then the CEO stepped forward slowly, his expression a mixture of astonishment and admiration. He reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope containing money for a meal, but this time it felt different. It wasn't a joke anymore. It was an acknowledgement of her skill, her courage, and the story she had just shared through her music. The girl accepted the envelope with a shy smile, but inside, she felt a surge of pride. For the first time in a long while, someone had truly seen her. Not as a homeless girl, but as a musician, as a person with talent and dreams. The CEO watched her, realizing that his casual challenge had led to a moment that neither of them would forget. He had laughed at first, expecting nothing, and now he found himself inspired by someone society had overlooked. As he walked away, he turned back once more, silently promising to do more than just feed her. He didn't yet know how, but he felt that he needed to support this girl in discovering the life she deserved. The crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring about the unexpected performance. But the memory of the girl and her music lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. The park returned to its usual rhythm, but for the CEO and the girl, the day had already changed forever. Their paths had crossed in a way that neither could have anticipated, and the first chapter of her story, filled with hope and new possibilities, had begun. The next morning, the girl woke up in the small shelter she had found, clutching the envelope the CEO had given her. It wasn't much, but it felt like a promise. A promise that the world might notice her one day, that her music might lead her somewhere she had only dreamed of. She held on to that thought as she prepared for the day, her fingers brushing against the notes she had scribbled in her tattered notebook. Each page was filled with melodies she had created over months of quiet solitude, moments when the world seemed to have turned its back on her. But her piano had never let her down. Meanwhile, the CEO could not stop thinking about the girl. He walked through his office with a distracted mind, replaying the memory of her hands moving across the piano keys. Her skill had been unexpected, breathtaking even. He had seen talented musicians before, trained in the finest conservatories. Yet her music had something raw, something alive. It spoke of struggle, resilience, and hope. He had laughed at his own words, expecting nothing, and yet she had amazed him. There was a curiosity growing inside him, a need to know more about her, to understand her story. Later that day, he returned to the park during his break. The girl was not there. He asked the nearby vendors if they had seen her, but no one had noticed her today. It bothered him more than he expected. He had been entertained by many things in his life, but rarely had he felt a connection to a stranger in such a deep way. It wasn't just her talent. It was the courage to show it in the face of the world that had ignored her. He decided he needed to find her again, to give her more than just a meal, to see what she could truly achieve if given a chance. Meanwhile, the girl wandered the streets, her stomach growling but her mind focused on the piano. She wanted to find another place to play, a place where she could practice and let the music flow freely. She remembered the look in the CEO's eyes, a mixture of amusement and surprise. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her and truly seen her talent. She wanted to live up to that recognition, to prove to herself that she was more than her circumstances. Days passed, and the girl continued to play wherever she could. Sometimes on a worn piano in a community center, other times on a keyboard she had borrowed from a kind neighbor. Her melodies grew more confident, more expressive, as if each note carried a piece of her soul. People began to notice her more, stopping to listen, leaving small donations, offering words of encouragement. She began to feel the shift, the faint stirring of possibility in a world that had once seemed so closed off. One afternoon, the CEO returned to the park, hoping to find her again. This time he brought someone with him, a friend who worked in the arts, hoping they could help recognize her talent properly. As he walked through the familiar path, he saw her at the piano, playing a melody that seemed to echo the story of her life. He paused, letting the music wash over him once more. His friend looked on in amazement, whispering, "She is remarkable, truly remarkable." The girl finished her piece, and for a moment, she looked around nervously. Then she saw him, the CEO, standing quietly with his friend. Her heart skipped a beat. She had not expected him to come back. She had not expected anyone to come back. Yet here he was, waiting to hear her play again, as if her music mattered to him beyond the amusement of a simple challenge. It mattered, she realized, and her confidence grew. He approached her slowly, careful not to startle her. "Your music is extraordinary," he said, his voice calm but filled with genuine admiration. "I want to help you. I want to give you the chance to learn, to grow, to share your music with the world." The girl blinked, overwhelmed. Help had been offered before, but it had always come with conditions, always with strings attached. This felt different. This felt real. She nodded slowly, trying to find the words. I don't know where to start. I've only had the piano I could find, and the music I wrote myself." Her voice was quiet, almost trembling, but he shook his head gently. "That's all that matters. Talent is in you, not in the instrument or the lessons. We can find a way to bring it out, to give it the life it deserves." His words were simple, but they carried a promise that made her chest swell with hope. The CEO spent the next few weeks helping her find a small studio where she could practice properly. He introduced her to teachers who were willing to guide her, to nurture her raw talent without judgment. Each day, she learned something new, her confidence growing with each note, each melody. She began to see a future she had never dared to imagine, a life that was not defined by her homelessness or her struggles, but by her music, by her gift. People in the neighborhood began to notice the change in her. The girl who had once sat alone, invisible, was now playing in a studio, her music filling the air, reaching ears that had never heard her before. She was learning discipline, technique, and expression, but she never lost the heart of her music, the raw emotion that had first drawn the CEO's attention. Her talent was growing, but so was her spirit. One day, the CEO visited the studio during a lesson. He watched quietly as her fingers danced over the keys, creating a melody that was both delicate and powerful. He remembered the first time he had heard her in the park, and he was amazed at the transformation, not just in her skill, but in her confidence, her presence, her ability to fill a room with music and emotion. He realized that giving someone a chance, even a small one, could change a life in ways he had never imagined. After the lesson, he handed her a notebook, similar to the one she had carried in the park. It was a gift, but also a symbol. "Fill this with your music," he said. "The world needs to hear it." She took it carefully, feeling the weight of the opportunity. It was more than just paper. It was recognition, a step toward the life she had dreamed of, a chance to be seen for who she truly was. The girl smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She realized that her life was beginning to change in ways she had never thought possible. The world, which had seemed so indifferent and harsh, was opening up to her, one note at a time. And she knew that as long as she had her music, and the people who believed in her, she could face whatever challenges came next. Her story was just beginning, and for the first time she felt ready to write it. Days turned into weeks, and the girl continued her lessons with a growing sense of confidence. The studio had become her safe place, a place where her music could breathe and grow without interruption. Every morning, she would arrive early, fingers ready to meet the keys, her mind focused entirely on the melodies she wanted to create. The teacher guiding her was patient, encouraging, and skilled, but what amazed everyone most was how quickly she absorbed every lesson. It was as if the music had always been inside her, waiting for the chance to emerge. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the transformation happening within the small studio. People passing by would occasionally hear the soft strains of piano music drifting through the windows. Sometimes they would pause, curious about the source of the beautiful sound. Some even stayed, listening quietly, moved by the raw emotion carried in the notes. It was a different kind of attention than what she had known on the streets. Here, her music was respected, cherished even. The CEO continued to check in on her progress, though he never interfered with the lessons. He watched from the corner of the room one afternoon, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, and a thoughtful expression on his face. The first time he had heard her play, it had been a surprise. Now, seeing her technique improve, seeing the emotion she poured into every piece, he felt a deep sense of pride. Not only was she talented, but she was dedicated, resilient, and eager to learn. Every note she played told a story, and he was witnessing the unfolding of that story. One afternoon, after finishing a particularly difficult piece, the girl slumped back in her chair, exhausted but satisfied. Sweat glistened on her forehead, and her fingers tingled from the effort. The teacher smiled, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You've improved so much," they said. "The way you play now, it's not just skill, it's expression. You make people feel the music." The girl smiled softly, a mix of relief and pride filling her chest. She had always dreamed of moments like this, where her talent was recognized not as a novelty but as something meaningful. She thought about the CEO who had seen her first performance and believed in her before anyone else. That small act of faith had changed everything, giving her the courage to pursue something she had only ever imagined in secret. Outside the studio, the CEO walked through the park, thinking about ways he could help her further. He wanted more than just lessons for her. He wanted her to have opportunities to perform, to be seen and heard by people who could truly appreciate her gift. He reached out to contacts in the music world, arranging small performances, finding spaces where she could play in front of supportive audiences. He knew she needed these experiences to grow, not just as a musician but as a person. The girl, unaware of these arrangements, continued to focus on her music. Each day she pushed herself a little further, exploring new pieces, experimenting with emotion and tempo, discovering the depth of her own talent. She found that her music could express feelings she had never been able to put into words. The piano became a friend, a companion that listened to her heart, responded to her emotions, and gave her strength. One evening, after a long day of practice, she walked through the streets carrying her small bag, feeling the city around her in a new way. The lights seemed brighter, the sounds sharper, and the people less distant. She had spent so long feeling invisible, overlooked, and unimportant, but now, she felt a sense of presence. Her music had given her a voice, and with that voice came confidence she had never known. A few days later, she received a surprise invitation. The CEO had arranged for her to play at a small community event, a chance to perform in front of an audience who would genuinely listen. She was nervous, more than she had ever been, but also excited. This was her first step toward sharing her talent with the world, and she wanted to do it justice. The thought of playing in front of people instead of just for herself was daunting, but it also sparked a thrill she could not ignore. On the day of the performance, the room was filled with people of all ages. Some were familiar with her story, others were there out of curiosity, but everyone was eager to hear the music that had already begun to capture hearts quietly. She walked onto the small stage, the piano waiting for her, and took a deep breath. Her hands hovered over the keys, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. She closed her eyes and let the music take over. The first notes flowed smoothly, delicate and confident. The audience leaned in, listening intently. Her fingers moved with precision, but it was the emotion in her playing that held their attention. Each chord told a story, of struggle, of hope, of dreams waiting to be realized. The music filled the room, resonating with the listeners, drawing out feelings they had not expected to experience. Some had tears in their eyes, others sat silently, captivated by the intensity of her performance. The CEO watched from the back, a small smile on his face. He had known she had talent, but seeing her perform in this setting was different. It was proof that belief and opportunity could transform lives. The applause at the end of her piece was thunderous, but what mattered most was the quiet recognition that followed. The understanding that this girl, once overlooked and ignored, had something extraordinary to offer. After the performance, people approached her with words of encouragement, compliments, and offers to help her pursue further opportunities. She felt a mixture of disbelief and joy. The world that had once seemed so closed off was beginning to open, and she realized that her music had become a bridge between her and the people around her. The The shy, lonely girl who had sat alone in the park was no longer invisible. She had a presence, a voice, and a path forward. The CEO approached her afterward, his eyes filled with pride. "You were amazing," he said simply. "I told you before, but now everyone can see it. Your music has the power to move people, to inspire them. Don't ever forget that." The girl smiled, feeling a warmth she had not felt in years. She knew her journey was only beginning, but for the first time, she felt that she was on the right path. The music that had always been her solace was now becoming her life, her purpose, and her connection to the world around her. She had taken the first steps toward something greater, and she was ready to see where her talent could lead her next. After her first performance, the girl's life began to change in small but meaningful ways. People she met in the streets began to recognize her, nodding or smiling when they saw her. Some would pause near the studio window to hear her play, and others offered words of encouragement, telling her that her music had touched them. It was different from the applause she received at the community event. This was more personal, a quiet acknowledgement from ordinary people who had felt her music's warmth. She continued her lessons, diving deeper into complex pieces and exploring new styles. Each day, her fingers moved faster and more confidently across the keys. The piano became an extension of herself, a way to express thoughts and emotions she had never been able to speak aloud. The music told her story, the struggles of living on the streets, the loneliness, the hunger, but also the hope that had always lived inside her. Each melody was a piece of her soul shared with the world. The CEO kept a careful watch on her progress, arranging opportunities for her to play in small venues and community centers. He wanted her to gain experience performing in front of audiences who would appreciate her skill and nurture her confidence. Each event brought her new supporters, some of whom offered guidance, lessons, or introductions to people in the music industry. The world she had once believed was closed to her was slowly opening, and she felt herself growing stronger with every note she played. One afternoon, she was invited to play at a small local festival. The organizers had heard about her story and wanted to provide her a platform. As she approached the stage, her heart pounded. This was her first time performing outdoors in front of a larger audience. The sun shone brightly, casting long shadows on the ground, and a gentle breeze carried the sound of the city around her. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let her fingers find the keys. The music flowed naturally, every note carrying a depth of emotion that drew the audience in. Children sat cross-legged at the front, their eyes wide with wonder. Adults stopped their conversations, listening intently as the girl's melodies filled the air. Each chord, each delicate movement of her fingers, told a story of resilience and hope. The audience was captivated, unable to look away, as if they were being transported into the world she created through her music. The CEO watched from the crowd, standing quietly, his expression one of deep admiration. He had known she was talented, but seeing her perform in this setting was a different experience entirely. She had grown in ways that could not be measured simply by technique. She had learned to communicate with her music, to move people, to touch hearts. His initial curiosity had turned into a sense of pride and responsibility. He wanted to make sure she had every chance to succeed, to reach the people who could help her fulfill her dreams. After the performance, the crowd erupted in applause. People cheered, some wiped tears from their eyes, and many approached her, offering compliments and words of encouragement. She felt a mixture of humility and pride. It was overwhelming, but it was also affirming. For the first time, she felt that her talent was more than just a personal escape. It had a purpose, a power to inspire and connect with others. The days that followed were busy. She practiced diligently, took lessons seriously, and continued performing whenever the opportunities arose. Each performance brought new challenges and new rewards. She learned to control her nerves, to connect with her audience, and to express herself fully through her music. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It had become a bridge between her past and her future, between her struggles and her aspirations. The CEO remained a guiding presence in her life, though he never overshadowed her achievements. He offered advice, helped arrange performances, and introduced her to people who could help her grow. But he also allowed her space to develop her own identity as a musician. He believed in her talent, but he also believed in her potential to become a person who could inspire others, someone who could rise above her circumstances and create something meaningful. One evening, as she was leaving the studio, she paused to look at the city around her. The streets she had once wandered, filled with uncertainty and fear, now seemed full of possibility. She thought about how far she had come, from sitting alone in the park, overlooked and ignored, to performing in front of audiences who appreciated her gift. The music had not only changed her circumstances, it had changed her perspective, her confidence, and her belief in herself. Her teacher noticed the change as well. "You've come a long way," they said during a lesson. "Not just in skill but in presence. Your music carries your story, and people feel it. That is a rare gift." The girl nodded, understanding the truth in those words. She had spent so long feeling invisible, and now she was visible in a way she had never imagined. Her talent had become her voice, and with it, she could communicate more than words ever could. She felt a sense of responsibility to nurture that gift, to continue growing, and to honor the journey that had brought her here. As she practiced that evening, the CEO sent her a message, inviting her to a small private recital at a local music hall. He wanted her to perform for a select group of people who could potentially open doors for her future. The girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It was a step further into a world she had only glimpsed, but she was ready. She had grown in skill, confidence, and self-belief. She knew that each performance was a new opportunity to share her story, to connect with others, and to continue building the life she had always dreamed of. The night of the recital arrived, and the music hall was intimate, filled with people eager to hear her play. She stepped onto the stage, her heart racing, but her hands were steady. As she began to play, the audience was immediately captivated. Each note was precise, yet filled with emotion. The melodies she had composed carried a depth that resonated with everyone in the room. She was no longer just a girl playing piano. She was a storyteller, using her music to convey her journey, her struggles, her hope, and her dreams. The performance ended, and the applause was long and heartfelt. People approached her afterward, offering opportunities, mentorship, and encouragement. She realized that her music had opened doors not just for her talent, but for her life. The girl who had once been invisible in the streets now had a presence, a voice, and a future that was beginning to unfold. Her journey was far from over, but she had taken steps that would shape the rest of her life. The piano had not only been her escape, it had become the key to a new beginning. The girl had grown more confident in her music, but she still felt a mix of nervousness and excitement whenever she stepped into a new environment. Every time she played in front of a new audience, her heart raced, but she had learned to channel that energy into her performance. Music had become more than a skill. It was a way for her to express everything she had felt and experienced, from moments of despair to fleeting glimmers of hope. Each note carried a piece of her story, and she was discovering how powerful it could be when shared with others. The CEO continued to support her, not only by arranging performances but also by helping her connect with mentors and music professionals who could guide her. He had come to realize that talent alone was not enough. Guidance, opportunity, and encouragement were crucial to helping someone like her reach their full potential. He respected her independence, allowing her to make choices about her music while offering advice and insight when needed. He wanted her to grow not just as a musician, but as a confident young woman who could navigate the world on her own terms. One morning, he surprised her with an invitation to perform at a small charity event organized to support local youth programs. The event was intimate but filled with influential people who could provide further opportunities for her. She felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety as she prepared. Performing in front of strangers had become easier over time, but this felt different. She understood that this could be a turning point, a chance to demonstrate her skill and poise to people who could shape her future. When she arrived at the venue, the atmosphere was buzzing with energy. Volunteers moved about, setting up tables and decorations, while guests arrived in elegant attire, curious about the event. She was led to the piano, a grand instrument that gleamed under the soft lights. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to center her thoughts. The CEO watched from the back of the room, giving her an encouraging nod that steadied her nerves. As she began to play, the room fell into a hush. The music was rich and expressive, filled with emotion and depth. The melodies she created captured the attention of everyone present. Her fingers moved with confidence and grace, weaving a story that resonated with the listeners. The audience was captivated not only by her technical skill but by the emotion and sincerity in every note. The music seemed to speak directly to them, bridging the gap between performer and listener, and leaving a lasting impression on everyone in the room. Throughout her performance, the girl felt a sense of connection she had never experienced before. She could feel the audience reacting, some leaning in, some closing their eyes, all absorbed by her music. She realized that this was what she had been striving for all along, the ability to communicate her feelings and experiences through the piano. Each performance was no longer just a test of skill. It was an opportunity to touch hearts, to share her story, and to inspire others. After the performance, people approached her with praise and admiration. Some offered mentorship, others invitations to perform at more events, and a few even suggested recording opportunities. The girl was overwhelmed by the support and recognition, but she also felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had worked hard, faced countless obstacles, and now her efforts were beginning to bear fruit. The CEO stood beside her, proud of how far she had come, knowing that this was just the beginning of her journey. In the following weeks, her schedule became busier. She balanced lessons, practice sessions, and performances, each contributing to her growth as a musician. She discovered new techniques, explored different styles of music, and learned how to adapt her playing to suit various audiences. Every day brought new challenges but also new rewards. She felt more confident with each performance, more capable of expressing herself fully through the piano. One afternoon, she received a call from a music producer who had heard about her story and her talent. They wanted to meet her and discuss the possibility of recording a small album of her compositions. The girl was both nervous and excited. Recording in a studio was unfamiliar territory, but she knew it was an important step in sharing her music with a larger audience. She thanked the producer and arranged a meeting, feeling a mix of anticipation and determination. The CEO accompanied her to the meeting, offering support and guidance. The producer was impressed by her skill and the emotion in her music. They discussed potential tracks, arrangements, and ideas for her first album. The girl listened carefully, absorbing every suggestion, while also expressing her own vision. She wanted her music to reflect her journey, to tell her story in a way that was honest and heartfelt. The producer appreciated her dedication and agreed to work closely with her to bring her vision to life. As the recording process began, the girl discovered a new dimension of her music. Working in the studio required focus, patience, and adaptability. She learned how to refine her performances, how to capture the nuances of her playing, and how to communicate her emotions through the microphone. Each session was challenging but rewarding, and she grew more confident with every recording. The piano, which had been her refuge and her friend, now became a bridge to the wider world. Throughout this journey, the girl never forgot the struggles that had brought her to this point. She thought often of the times she had sat alone, unnoticed and hungry, finding solace only in her music. Those experiences shaped her, giving her a depth of emotion and understanding that enriched her playing. She realized that her hardships were not obstacles but parts of her story, parts that made her music resonate so deeply with others. The CEO remained a constant presence, offering advice, encouragement, and guidance. He celebrated her successes, comforted her during challenges, and reminded her of the importance of staying true to herself. His belief in her had never wavered, and she felt grateful for the opportunities he had provided. More than anything, she appreciated his trust and respect, which allowed her to grow without pressure or expectation, letting her talent flourish naturally. The girl continued to practice diligently, refine her skills, and prepare for performances and recording sessions. She felt a sense of purpose and direction that she had never known before. The piano had transformed from a simple instrument into a tool for self-expression, a path to opportunity, and a bridge to a future full of possibilities. With each note she played, she carried her story, her resilience, and her hope into the world, inspiring everyone who had the chance to listen. Her journey was far from over, but she had taken steps that would shape the rest of her life, and she was ready to continue moving forward, one melody at a time. Months had passed since the girl's first performance in the park, and her life had transformed in ways she had only dreamed of. She had moved from performing for small audiences to recording music in a studio, and each day brought new opportunities to share her gift with the world. Her skill had grown immensely, but more importantly, her confidence had blossomed. She had discovered a strength within herself that had always been there, waiting for the chance to shine. The CEO continued to support her, not as a patron but as a mentor and friend. He had witnessed her journey from the moment he had laughed at his own words in the park to seeing her stand confidently in front of an audience, commanding attention with every note she played. He was proud of her growth, but he also understood that her success was the result of her dedication, resilience, and passion. His role was simply to help open doors and provide guidance, while she took the steps to walk through them. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a prominent local concert hall. This was a larger stage than she had ever encountered, with an audience that included music critics, journalists, and professionals from the industry. The thought of playing in front of such a crowd made her nervous, but she also felt ready. She had faced challenges before, and she knew that her music had the power to connect with people, no matter the size of the audience. As she prepared for the performance, she practiced tirelessly. She focused not just on technical skill but on expressing the emotions that had shaped her journey. Every note she played told a story, the struggles of her past, the hope she had nurtured, and the dreams she was now pursuing. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice, a companion, and a bridge between her and the world. Her fingers moved with precision and confidence, but it was the emotion behind each melody that made her playing extraordinary. The night of the performance arrived, and the concert hall buzzed with anticipation. The girl took a deep breath as she walked onto the stage. The audience fell silent, waiting for her first note. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and then let her fingers glide across the keys. The music began softly, delicate and tender, capturing the attention of everyone in the room. As the piece progressed, it grew stronger and more expressive, filling the hall with a rich, emotional sound. People in the audience were captivated. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, absorbed in the intensity of her performance. The melodies carried a depth of feeling that transcended words, telling the story of a young girl who had faced adversity and emerged stronger, determined to share her gift with the world. The CEO watched from the back, a small smile on his face, filled with pride and admiration. He had never doubted her talent, but seeing her command such a stage was more than he had imagined. After the performance, the applause was thunderous. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping, moved by the music they had just heard. Critics approached her afterward, praising her technical skill, emotional depth, and unique style. Invitations to perform at other venues and events began to arrive, and she realized that her life was changing in ways she had never thought possible. Her talent was no longer hidden. It was being recognized, celebrated, and shared with the world. The girl felt a mixture of gratitude and humility. She remembered the days when she had sat alone in the park, overlooked and ignored, finding solace only in her music. Those moments of struggle had shaped her, giving her a depth of emotion and understanding that enriched her performances. She realized that her past, with all its hardships, had contributed to the musician she had become. Every note she played was infused with the resilience, hope, and determination that had carried her through difficult times. In the weeks that followed, her life became increasingly busy. She balanced lessons, practice, recording sessions, and performances, each contributing to her growth as a musician and as a person. She explored new styles, composed original pieces, and experimented with different forms of expression. The piano remained her constant companion, a source of comfort, inspiration, and strength. It had been her refuge, her voice, and now it was the key to her future. The CEO continued to guide her, helping her navigate the complexities of the music world. He offered advice, introduced her to industry professionals, and encouraged her to take on new challenges. But he also allowed her space to grow independently, trusting her judgment and respecting her decisions. He had learned that her success was not just about opportunity. It was about her determination, talent, and willingness to embrace every challenge. She was creating her own path, and he was proud to support her along the way. One afternoon, she was invited to give a special performance at a charity gala. The event was filled with influential people who could help further her career and expand her opportunities. She prepared diligently, focusing on conveying the emotions behind each piece. As she played, the audience was captivated. The music was not just skillful. It was heartfelt, telling the story of her journey from hardship to hope, from loneliness to recognition. People were moved, inspired, and amazed by the depth of her talent. After the gala, she received numerous offers for mentorship, collaborations, and performances at other prestigious venues. She realized that her journey, which had begun with a single encounter in a park, was now taking her to places she had never imagined. She had transformed from a shy, unnoticed girl into a confident musician with the ability to inspire and connect with others through her art. Her music had become a bridge, linking her past struggles with her present achievements and future possibilities. The girl reflected on how far she had come. She had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, endured loneliness and hunger, and yet her love for music had carried her through. She had discovered her own strength, her resilience, and her ability to inspire others. Her journey was a testament to the power of belief, opportunity, and perseverance. She understood that success was not just about talent, but about courage, dedication, and the willingness to embrace every challenge. The CEO continued to be a source of support and encouragement, celebrating her achievements while respecting her independence. He had been there from the beginning, recognizing her potential when no one else did. His belief in her had opened doors, but it was her dedication, passion, and resilience that had allowed her to walk through them. Together, they had created a path that led from the streets to the stage, from invisibility to recognition, from struggle to hope. As she sat at the piano one evening, reflecting on her journey, she felt a sense of fulfillment and purpose. She had overcome obstacles, discovered her talent, and shared it with the world. Her music had touched hearts, inspired others, and given her a sense of identity and direction she had never known. She realized that this was only the beginning. Her journey was far from over, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With every note she played, she carried her story, her resilience, and her hope into the world, creating a life filled with possibility, purpose, and music.